which I was very, that was very good. Board, are we ready? Last meeting of 2023. Okay, I'd like to call to order the 913th meeting of the Board of Directors of Alexandria Sanitation Authority, now known as AlexRenew Enterprises. AlexRenew. We could take a look at the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as it appears?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Madam
Aye.
Secretary. Madam Secretary, do we have any members of the public? We could, board members, take a look at the minutes from November. And when you're ready, I will consider a motion to approve.
I will reapprove the minutes.
There's a motion by Mr. Beal to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
By Ms. Caldarelli. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You. Moving right to member committee updates, community meetings. I think the town has been roiled by the zoning for housing. And as soon as that calmed down, everyone's focused on the new arena. So I'm not sure water issues are top of mind anywhere.
I went to the Delray Civic Association and they had 400 people online.
I was one of them.
There is one update on the contacts that the president of Delray Civic is Katie Wainick. I will write that down for you.
Finance and Audit Committee, any updates?
No, not since our last meeting.
Governance.
We have the environmental policy that we'd like to submit for approval to the board.
Want to do that now or under item 7?
I'm sorry.
Item 7.
And we are, Mr. Jinks and I are updating the finance and committee policies. And we hope to bring that to the board early next year.
Thank you. Thank you. Board retreat, January 5th and 6th, which is right around the corner. Mr. Carl, do you have an update on that?
Yeah, so the front right of your desk tonight, there's a few items that we just wanted to run through really quick. We updated the calendar of events for FY 2024, which includes the first half of 2024, January through June. Two things that are coming up are finance and audit on February 12th. We're going to have a meeting to discuss the rate model and also look at future rate projections for the revenue program, including the upcoming rate projection of 5.1% that was proposed for FY 2025. So that's on February 12th. And then we have another Finance and Audit Committee meeting scheduled for March the 18th, where we'll present the preliminary draft budget for FY 2025. So that's circling back already. In addition to that packet, we've also passed around hard copies now of the final annual report. We'll make sure this is on the website as well, but this is the final hard copy of the annual report for last year, for 2023. You've seen many drafts of this now up to date and printed on the glossy paper. You received in the board packet a copy of the ACFR, so that you have in your board packet. And then finally, we've got an entire packet together for the 2024 board retreat. So it's the agenda that we've been looking at for the past few months. And then in addition to that, we also put in the read ahead material that were distributed by Ms. McGee. a few weeks ago, and the draft presentation that I distributed last week that is outlining current and future initiatives. There is also a tab in there, tab 1, that goes through the building momentum activity. A few of our team members have recently gone through this. You're going to be doing the electric vehicle team building activity at building momentum after we do our strength session and discussion with Sally Overland. So everything's there. Should you need it, you don't need to go back to those emails. Everything's printed out in front of you. So this is yours, from now until January 5th and 6th. We might make a few tweaks to the presentation in tab 3, but it's majority of it is there.
So this is board homework over the December holiday, right? To read this.
Yes.
Okay, sounds fair. Thanks for putting this packet together. Very nice. And the attire for the retreat is business casual? We have time to decide.
I think the Friday meeting, I would dress casual.
Okay.
When we just did it with building momentum casual, and then Saturday, I think business casual is fine. We did a public meet, both our public meetings.
Hope you're ready. Anything else? Thank you. Thank you. Let's move right to item 6. Payment assistance program. A lot of progress has been made. Let's hear all about it.
All right, Mr. Robertson's going to go through and give an update. Really, what we wanted to do is have a discussion on the progress we've made since our last board meeting on our payment assistance program updates, really focusing on the emergency hardship assistance piece of that program, and really discuss about what lies ahead, what we're going to be doing from an outreach perspective, and what we're looking and thinking about, for the future. So without turning it over to Mr. Roberts.
Okay, so if you all will recall, there were essentially 4 pieces to AlexRenew's payment assistance program here. The payment plan piece, which is that structured duration for payment plans based off of arrearage value, that is in place now. This emergency assistance piece is largely going to be covered here by our LEAP program. That will provide the one-time emergency assistance for AlexRenew customers. So the program itself will be administered by Dollar Energy Fund. We reached out to a number of local parties that we were familiar with, 501c3s, some of the connections we had previously used in for other programs. Dollar Energy Fund had a lot to offer. That's the group we ended up selecting for a number of reasons, which I'll cover here in a second. They helped us come up with this fund goal of $20,000. They were able to share, that's what Virginia American Water currently distributes in our area. So it's sort of a good benchmark for us to try to meet. They do assess an administrative fee of 8.75%, which is not very large, and it comes with a number of benefits. The first is that they have software in place that will help streamline our rollout and speed up the process for implementation. They also have a network of local partners that they already work with for other utilities, including Virginia American Water. So what that means is they're able to reach out to those parties right now and get them set up in a matter of weeks to help send our customers to Dollar Energy for distributions. And they'll also help train our staff, which is another benefit. They're sort of set up to help administer all these things. As far as funding goes, there's 3 main sources we've come up with right now. The first is individual and corporate donations. We reached out to a number of our partners, contractors, groups that we work with on a regular basis, shared information about the LEAP program, some of the benefits to Alexandrians, and We gave a link basically where they can make a donation, and we've received really positive feedback from that. We have a number of contractors that have reached out and said they would make, fairly decent contributions on their organization's behalf before the end of the year. So it's really promising outreach to start. In spring of 2024, I think you all may recall from us talking about the My AlexRenew payment portal, we'll be able to roll out that opt-in option to customers where they can, make a set donation per month that's just sort of automatic. That's going to be a great way to fund the program going forward. And then I think the third option is also something sort of unique to AlexRenew, but it's going to be a way that we can fund the program. Currently, we're not charging 501c3s or local organizations to use our 6th floor. I think a lot of them will be really interested in helping Alexandrians this way. And it's also, there's no cost for them to use the floor. It's a very easy ask to just make a small contribution to the program. So that's something else we're going to sort of push lightly going forward.
Is that, excuse me, before you move on, is that something that when people reserve the room, they'll be made aware of
Yes.
that time?
Yes. So we have sort of a protocol anytime somebody reserves the room. And as part of that, we send out, an email with all the steps for renting the room, certain things we ask. So in that email, we're going to include a link to Dollar Energy, starting to, basically last week. This gives you, sorry.
One of the popular meeting places in town, of course, is the Lyceum. They have a rather hefty fee for use of it.
Yeah.
You might want to look at that
Okay.
to get a comparable.
Yeah. Good idea. Here's the basic eligibility requirements of the program to start. You must be an AlexRenew account holder for this program. Have a 60-day past due balance of $100 or more, 50 if you're a senior, and the income requirement is less than or equal to 150% of the poverty, federal poverty level. Sorry. As we kind of mentioned, the program is administered through Dollar Energy, and applicants can receive a max disbursement of $350 per year. Sort of baked into Dollar Energy's program. They also didn't require a sincere effort of payment. So for us, we set it at $50, which is relatively low. That can be paid over 3 months as well. So a little lower if you're a senior, $25.
Could you walk through a transaction? Okay. Let's pretend I'm a ratepayer, perhaps $200 in arrear, and I'm low income. I meet that income threshold. How does this process look to me?
So
how does it start?
So you can call either the customer service line for AlexRenew. You can reach out to Dollar Energy, or you can reach out to one of the partner organizations that we work with. Dollar Energy likes to funnel customers to the local groups because usually they're aware of all the locality utility issues. They can help provide them assistance for a number of things, but they're also aware of if they have frequent visitors or that sort of thing, they can help kind of weed it out for Dollar Energy. So that's their preferred method, but you can go directly to Dollar Energy. Our customer service team would funnel people either to a local partner or Dollar Energy themselves.
Okay. And you'll get into who is a local partner. But yeah. Okay, so you funnel me to a local partner. What does that local partner do?
So typically, the way that I've seen it in the past is you go there, they sit down with you, they ask usually the local partner agencies work on a number of different utilities. So they sit down and ask the needs of the client. If they're an AlexRenew customer and they qualify, then they would then go directly into Dollar Energy's system and get them situated right then. They don't need to reach out to Dollar Energy. The partner agency would handle the whole interaction.
I think the question came before we got to the slide, but there are certain local partners that we want to work with as well that, as we've discussed in the past, St. Timothy's, we've also discussed using Act for Alexandria. That's more of a fundraising side, and also Christchurch. We reach out to them to let them know that we've made this progress, to date. So Dollar Energy would train not just our staff, but they're also going to be training the local partners as well on how to use the Dollar Energy software, which the name of it right now escapes my head, what they named their software, but they have a software they use to implement this type of program.
Yeah, and so a number of the partners they already work with, like Virginia American Water, they already have the Dollar Energy system set up. They already know how to qualify customers. They would just have to look at our requirements, make sure that matches up with the customer capability. They would be able to get them set up right there.
Good thing. I've got a sense of it now.
Who does the verification of income?
So that would be on the partner group and Dollar Energy. I'm not 100% honest, to be honest, not sure if it's Dollar Energy or the partner organization that does the verification. I believe it's the partner.
I think one important note on this slide too is these are our the way we initially structured the program. If we're not getting a lot of use out of this when we start to move forward with with water shutoffs, we can relax the terms with Dollar Energy. They're flexible enough where we can change the terms month to month to be able to be utilized, by our customers. So if we're not seeing a lot of use these first 3 months, we might change the criteria to a lower threshold to be able to qualify.
And assuming that somebody's eligible under Mr. Hill's example for $200, then 150 would come to AlexRenew because there's the requirement for the $50.
Well, they would get the whole amount paid to their bill. They have to make an additional
Okay.
contribution. Okay. This gives you sort of a timeline for implementation. As far as payment plan outreach goes, we've been doing that all along, been doing it all year. We'll sort of ramp those efforts up as we get closer to this disconnection program, but we've already begun the initial ramp up of that. The Dollar Energy implementation itself should take about 2 months. And then LEAP customer outreach can begin once we are pretty confident of the start date for the program itself, which we should know relatively soon. It's right now they're anticipating that. That's what we
So, given that timeline, and I understand this is notional at this point, right? When would the first disbursement happen?
Well, ideally, I mean, they're thinking they can stand up the program beginning to mid-February, right? So as soon as it's fully implemented, they could, in theory.
Oh, I thought we had to get up to $20,000 to disperse.
Yeah, so we're hoping we can get that relatively quickly. That's kind of the plan. They'll start at 15.
15,000 in the pot.
And how much is in it now?
We have 60 sitting in a bank account currently with United Way. We have 6730.30. And in the account, as of this morning, there's 2550. And that's just based on 4 donations. We know there's another half dozen to 10 donations coming in.
So there's been a number of people that kind of replied to our initial outreach and said they were making a contribution.
So we're already at about 9.
Yeah,
Theory, yeah.
once we get the money back from.
Wow.
United Way.
2550 is 2,500.
Sorry, $2,550 as of this morning.
Plus the 67.
And we know there were some donations throughout the day as well.
So we're
That's in-
relatively close, honestly.
That's in 5
That's excellent.
days.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Great time of year.
Here's some of the outreach initiatives that we're going to use to support LEAD. We had kind of already discussed this, but we're going to initially train customer service staff here so they know the proper protocol. We're partnering with some of these local agencies. This is just a handful. Also leverage the groups that Dollar Energy already works with currently. And then we'll reach out. I mean, there's sort of 2 target audiences for this, right? There's donors, and then there's people that need the assistance. So we'll have to reach out to both. Initially, we'll go after donors, and then later down the line, reach out to people that actually need assistance. But we have a number of ways we can reach out to these groups, and that's bill inserts, email, social media, AlexRenew.com, the portal, and then also Spring to Action is an option that we're working on right now. That might be another way we can kind of see the money pretty quickly.
Mr. Robertson, if there's anything the board members can do to help you, please engage them.
Okay, we might take you.
Yes, definitely. We did pass around in your packet of materials at the top right. We did pass around a revised flyer. We also emailed this out. So this is really to get the word out. The point of this flyer is more for donors right now, and this is focused on donors. We'll have another flyer that comes out later that is highlighting the eligibility criteria and how to be able to get funds. So we're happy to print these out if you're going to be out at meetings and things like that, to leave them at meetings.
So we can distribute these now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have some meetings at Christ Church on Thursday. I'll take a stack. Mr. Jenks, I believe you have an association with ACT Alexandria?
I am the treasurer as of last week. Yes.
And I'm active in the Lazarus Ministry at Christ Church.
I would take a stack also. I could get some.
For ACT, we did reach out about participating in Spring to Action last week, as soon as this was live, and as well as Christ Church, we made contact with them as well.
We can help navigate those organizations.
There's one other source of funding that we didn't discuss because it was a eureka moment from one of our staff, but currently AlexRenew participates in an energy program through a third party that works with Dominion and energy providers throughout the region to, I'll use the word, offload the grid during times of need. So if we have a really hot day and there's a lot of demand on the grid, we can cut back solids, for example, and cut back the energy use needed for the grid, and it supports, the greater community. It's something we've been doing for the past 2 years. As a result of that, we get a rebate back from that third-party provider. This ranges between $15,000 and $20,000 per year. We get paid back quarterly. Our idea was to have those funds, because it's not rate revenue, have those funds instead of coming back to AlexRenew. We're looking to revise our agreement with that provider. Maybe let Mr. Akinkube remembers their name. Once we get that revised, we'll have those funds go directly to Dollar Energy to fund our program. That's another reliable source of income that we can have for LEAP. That's something we're working on now as well, help fund it.
One of the items not on here is news release, so that we can get our local papers and the online daily publications. We'll print anything cash. And the Alex Now, another good place to get it out generally in the community. So either education or reminder for people who've seen it otherwise is there. Donation, can we say tax deductible donation? It is, because we're a governmental entity. That's,
Well,
say that.
and technically the money goes to 501c3 organization. They're a 501c. I mean, sorry, Dollar Energy. They're a 501c3. So we're good. So you can say that.
You want to go for future growth? Do we go through?
Oh, yeah, sorry. So these are just sort of opportunities for future growth of the LEAP program. With a bill discount program. I think you all have discussed this past meetings, but it would basically qualified customers would receive a monthly discount. Arrearage forgiveness, that would again be for qualifying customers, total arrearage amount potentially. And then assistance for renters, providing that sort of an effort to reach the customers that are renting currently and are AlexRenew account holders. It's still a way to reach and help those customers. So that's sort of the long-term other routes we could go.
The arrearage forgiveness piece, we've been discussing that, as a group. Ms. Hammer brought it up as a question at our last meeting. We talked to Dollar Energy about that. They've been doing this for other utilities across the United States. Their recommendation was to get some data first to see what our usage looks like before we start going into the arrearage forgiveness piece and the renters piece to see where we stand as a program. The bill discount program is looking at leveraging Dollar Energy to serve more as a customer assistance program as opposed to hardship. That would likely need, a greater amount of funding depending on the criteria that go into that. So that's that next piece of coordinating more with the city to see if we can get a, larger fund balance than what we're going to get through these donations.
I know that you have thoughtfully tried to stand up this program and just ahead of shut-offs. Do we have a sense of that, like 350 is the maximum disbursement for the year? Do we have a sense of how, is that realistically going to help people from getting their water shut off? Do we know how much people are behind? Is that a dent in it? Do you have any sense?
The thought behind 350 was to offset the impacts of AlexRenew on the average family's bill. So if you look at the impacts of AlexRenew before back to 2018 and looking at 2026, the annual delta, if you're using 4,000 gallons a month, is around 325. We rounded up to 350. That is, you can also go back and do the math another way, 45 to 50 bucks a month times the year. It should get them back to, a balance of close to zero. So we weren't going to necessarily get all of it, but that was our basis for coming up with 350. And I think we'll have to see.
Sure.
I think the first 3 to 6 months of this program is based on what we discussed with Dollar Energy is we're going to see what the demand is and we're going to see who's applying once we start going out and doing the shutoffs. And I think we might need to be flexible during that time. If we're not getting a lot of customers reaching out to the program, we might need to change the criteria for eligibility. And it might need to be, a little more, have a higher income.
Are you anticipating that this disbursement or however this is done will work in concert with the payment plan for what's left or have we?
Yes. So if it doesn't cover all of their bill, again, it's an annual disbursement, so we could go back the next year and they could get another disbursement, but we also still have the payment plans that are structured around their arrearage, and that could, if their arrearage goes down significantly, could kick them into a different payment plan over 3 months and get it paid off.
I think we would work too with our Dollar Energy partners to sort of make sure that whoever comes in is aware that they can also sign up for a payment. And there's, I think there's kind of a balance to be found between helping the most people and providing a huge sum for one person. And I think it's sort of not experimental, but until we implement a program, I don't think we're going to be able to tell exactly where that balance is.
To Ms. Caldarelli's question a minute ago, though, do we know what the average residential arrearage is? Is this even kind of in the same order of magnitude as how much people owe on average?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at average for a residential customer, there's a number of different types of residents, so you can kind of break it in categories. And I don't have that data off the top of my head, but I think you'd want to compare single family homes to townhouses, that sort of thing. Yeah.
We can certainly break down the data and send around an average arrearage.
Yeah, sure.
We have the
That'd be
data.
great. And while I have the mic, it's hard to jump in. Just a question on the flyer. Is that going to be available in other languages?
For the current
For
flyer,
the LEAP flyer.
For the, when we go out to do for the program for eligibility, definitely. We typically do English and Spanish currently, but we can certainly translate it to any other language. I guess the current flyer, we're just trying to get this out as quickly as possible to ramp up donations.
Right, yeah, I was thinking more when it's time to notify customers. Right,
Definitely think we should do more languages than just Spanish.
yeah, like at least Amharic and like Pashto, I think.
I think the last city meeting we went to had Amharic, Spanish, Arabic,
Yeah.
and English.
Yeah, they usually
I
have
think
5.
we'll-
Yeah.
Maybe we'll leverage the city's translators to see if they can help us out.
Do we have this flyer electronically so we can
Yes.
pass it on? We do.
I sent, the most recent email that I sent to the board has that in it. It's, I think, current version, or I'm happy to redistribute it. We're happy to print copies as well, and you can pick them up. Unless you want to. I don't know how many we have left at the meeting, Ms. Huff. We have additional copies at the meeting? We'll see what we have left over. If you want to take some tonight.
Mr. Carl, compliments on the graphics and the messaging. It's concise, it's informative, it's very eye-catching. It's a very nice job.
Before we move off this topic, I want to make sure all board members have any questions answered. Ms. Hammer, I know you're with us. Did we answer all your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for the update. And again, we really have to applaud the staff here. You have moved so much faster than even we expected, and our expectations are always high. This is incredible. Donations are coming in. The start date, it's only months away. This is incredible. Kudos to the team. Kudos to the team. And the timing is perfect. Moving right along to new business and the review of environmental policy. Mr. Beal.
We brought this up at the last meeting. Ms. Hammer and I had some further conversations with staff, and we have the new environmental justice policy for adoption by the board. Ms. Hammer, do you want to say anything? You're there.
I don't think there's anything additional really to go into. We didn't do anything beyond what was discussed at the last meeting, so it should be, it's the same that everyone saw. But I'm really excited with how it turned out. Very excited to present it to the rest of the board.
I agree. It's a good document.
Yeah. I have to admit, I read it very carefully. It's beautifully written. Those first opening paragraphs especially summarizes to me what is environmental justice. I thought it was just beautifully written.
I would completely agree. I think this is like I usually read with my pen in the hand.
Me too.
But something that's a draft, I'm like, this reads wonderfully. My question has to do with, let's say the first bullet is assess existing infrastructure programs and projects. What is your thought on timetable to do that?
So we've already engaged a consultant to start the assessment. Brown and Caldwell supports other clients throughout the United States. They're one of our basic ordering agreement engineers that we have on hand, but they go outside of engineering. They also have, they support us with customer outreach, on some of the programs here, including AlexRenew. So we're starting on that now. We gave them about a year to do the assessment, to circle back, and throughout that assessment, we anticipated the team coming in to give updates to the board on the findings. One, what the assessment's going to include, and then get some feedback early next year, and then move forward and start the assessment and give regular updates throughout the year. And that will culminate in a short we're getting more graphic reports these days using PowerPoint as opposed to a thick written document saying what the needs will be coming out of the assessment.
Do you envision looking not just within fence of our organization, but the neighborhoods that are surrounding us?
Yeah, so the intent would be, we impact everybody in the city of Alexandria from a financial standpoint, so there's going to be that piece of it. And our infrastructure, and where infrastructure is located is going to be another focus of that. Our interceptors, our pumping stations, as well as our wastewater plant. So it's going to include all of that.
And adjacent
Correct.
neighborhoods.
Yep.
Because I think like many environmental facilities, they ended up getting placed historically because they weren't wanted in other places. And if you look at the neighborhoods around here, there are almost completely surrounding us were African-American neighborhoods or big pockets of those historically.
We put together our public facing documents and web presence. I encourage you, Mr. Carl, to find ways to get this language front and center. It's a very beautiful statement of sort of corporate direction.
A lot of utilities post their EJ statements online. We anticipate to do the same once it was approved by the board. San Francisco PUC has theirs online. It was an initial document we used for guidance, but we plan to get this up on the web.
Yeah,
for sure.
And
it's
posted in the lobby and
Yes.
various places in this organization. Yeah.
And excerpts placed in annual reports and audit reports and just places where it clearly states where we're headed. Very well written. Excellent, excellent.
We can move the adoption of this.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Caldarelli. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. No opposed. Very good. Very good. Okay, let's move right to fiscal 2025. We there already? Carl, kick this off?
Yes, so we started so we're joined tonight by, I think, some of the board members know Ms. Fry, but some of you may not, but she's been advising us on our investments and financial policies for 15 years, for about 15 years here at AlexRenew. Mr. Akinkube and Ms. Fry are going to walk through our plan of finance for some of our upcoming capital work. This is capital work that has been deferred when AlexRenew took over RiverRenew, and that we are much needed investment on. It includes our front end of our plant, our solids process, and then the polishing step, our tertiary process. In addition to that, we also wanted to give you a very, very, very preliminary highlight of some of the budget initiatives for FY25 before we come back in February and have a further discussion around our rate structure. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Akinkube to walk through the beginning of the presentation.
So, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As Mr. Carl alluded to, we're not discussing any hard numbers this evening, but more so a preview of what to come in months ahead. So here on this slide is like the 8 major budget cycle process. The first 4 cycle process there involves the planning process, which starts simultaneously. As you all know, we just concluded our FY23 audit. recently, about a month ago. And right as soon as we were concluding that, the planning for FY 2025 budget process commenced. That being said, the first 4 steps here really talks about, what our budget goals are going to be for FY 25 budget goals, our budget target. We have a preliminary budget forecast. And then we run those target goals and forecasts through our rate model to see what type of impact it has on our current rate, if any. And then the second half of the charts 5 through 8 pretty much happens on the second half of the year. The first 4 happens more in the second quarter of the fiscal year. 5 through 8 happens in the second half of the year. And this is where, like Mr. Carl said, we come in front of the board to present and discuss what those numbers are and the impacts to the rate. We present that to the public during public hearing as well. Hopefully it gets approved by the board by June. So that's the takeaway from the slide right here. Mr. Carl alluded to this too earlier. Here are some important FY 25 budget process dates. Obviously a date, short-term date the board is looking forward to is the board retreat, which is on January 5th and 6th. But from February through June, again, alludes back to the previous slide I was talking about, which is the second half of the budget cycle process. This is where myself, Mr. Carl, AlexRenew team members come back to the board. We present FY 25 budget results, any impact to the rates, public hearing, again, with the hopes to get it approved in June.
Mr. Akankube, one thing on the previous slide, on the 12th, where we go through the rate model and have a discussion around rates, we're also going to come back to the board and have a discussion based on previous public comment on the winter average. The winter quarter average.
Thank you, Mr. Carl.
Thank you.
Again, as we start to plan for the FY 25 budget process, here are some of the key initiatives we are going to be putting into consideration as we develop the document. And they are categorized into 4 main categories: revenue, debt, operating, and capital. So the initiative and assumption on the revenue is, as you are well aware of, we have a rate increase effective July 1, 2024. We are anticipating flows returning back to pre-pandemic levels. We've seen a slight decrease ever since the pandemic, where flows has decreased, but we are factoring back, they're coming back to pre-pandemic levels for FY 25. Customer account growth remains relatively flat. As a matter of fact, over the 10 years here in AlexRenew, customer growth has been around 1%. Over the past 3 years, it's been relatively zero, not much growth.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Can we go back to the bullet above that says flows returning to pre-pandemic levels?
Correct.
See a lot of still really vacant office space. What is driving you to believe that our flows are going to return to pre-pandemic levels?
Pretty much.
Yeah, so I think as part of this process, every year we go back and look at the previous 3 years.
Mhm.
2020 and 2021, we saw flows drop from, 4.8 K gals to 4 K gals. We're starting to see those ramp back up. I think last year we saw them around 4.4, 4.6. So we're just watching the trend of the flows come back up. And that's what's leading us to, going back and looking at these, flows coming back to pre-pandemic levels. There were some decisions made from a budgetary standpoint a few years back that flows are going to remain relatively flat, but we're not seeing that. We're seeing flows come back up. And it's not due to growth, it's due to people's usage.
We ended up last year with, I think, 8% more in revenues. And a good chunk of that was because there was more paid bill flow. And we ought to see that number again this year. and another surplus for the current year that we're in. And I'd like a little more detailed calibration of what those numbers are. Make sure that we don't set the rates higher than we need to. We set them where they should be.
And I think we'll go through that discussion. You'll see that flow drop and coming back up as part of our discussion in February on the 12th. We'll actually go through and look at the data that we have from billing.
What we also, I think, you're seeing is what we don't see new customers. That office building is a customer, one customer, remains one customer. But if it converts, we have one of the highest rates of conversion of office to residential in the United States. We've been in the top 5 for the last few years. There's going to be residential use that's now coming out of those office buildings, but it's the same. It's a one customer for that address.
Yeah, did we answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
No problem. So those are just the key initiative and assumption we plan to put as we come up with our FY25 revenue budget estimates. Debt, and Ms. Fry will be talking a little bit more about some of the new debt we are going to incur, I should say, in FY25. The operating budget, we continue to focus on recruiting and retaining a talented and diverse workforce. As you all know, personnel accounts for over 50% of our operating budget. We want to make sure we have the great workforce and a diverse workforce. That continues to be a key initiative. We have a new customer billing system in place, fully implemented in FY25, where if you realize in FY24 budget, there was a dip in the operating budget that was due to a lot of capital improvement to put the new system in place. But now that that system is fully implemented, you see the operational cost come back to pretty much pre-FY24 level where it was. Additional operating support, and we're talking about maintenance support for recently added technology improvement and upgrades that we've done. Again, we have those technologies now in place. And so there's an annual subscription and operating cost that goes with that to maintain that going forward. We continue to see operating costs relating to wastewater treatment services to ensure our permit compliance. Such a big thing, what we do here at AlexRenew. Capital budget, which is a combination of capital project and IR&R. River Renewal project continues in FY25, even though we're coming towards the tail end of that project. And as Mr. Carl alluded to earlier, as we coming towards the tail end of the River Renewal project, we have other projects that we've had on our CIP planning sheet for years that we haven't really had time to focus on, start to focus on those. Again, Ms. Fry is going to talk a little bit more about those projects. Those includes the solid upgrade, the preliminary and primary system upgrade, tertiary system upgrade, Commonwealth Interceptor study, asset management, as well as campus-wide upgrade.
Question for you.
Yes, sir.
Just to put some order of magnitude numbers on this, we had 42 million was what the CIP that we adopted in June for fiscal 25. Do we expect the number to be around there, a little bit higher than there, or significantly higher than there?
We're still scrubbing those numbers right now, based on, and Mr. Carl.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Mr. Jenks, one more time.
The CIP that we adopted said that for IRR and for our capital projects, excluding River Renew, that the total was, I guess I'm reading, well, I'll go down one more line, 53 million, if you round up, for 25. Do we
Yeah,
expect the numbers somewhere in that ballpark?
Yeah, so if you jump forward one slide. Yeah, so it's hard to read in this slide. So solids, we're likely starting, solids and preliminary and primary both going to be procured using CMAR. So they're going to ramp up slowly. Solids is 40 million all in. Preliminary primary is about 80 million all in. Those two projects are what we're going to be talking about funding this evening. Between the two of them, we're at, 120, I think, our initial discussion around budget for CIP work in FY 25 through FY 27 is going to be around 60 million for these specific projects
Total.
total for what we need to fund. Is we're looking at around 60 million for 2 years and then the remainder in another tranche for the years after that to support tertiary and PPSU. So
Keep going.
IRR component of that. So if we're looking at next year, it's likely going to be next year, specifically if our number was around 50 million in the budget, I see 12 million in that being IRR based on our current projections. And then the remainder being focused on solids and some preliminary primary, but it's probably again in magnitude of 20 to 30 million dollars next year. So probably around there, slightly less, is my guess.
So it's that, we're not gonna see a double or triple.
No.
No,
No.
we're not
It's
seeing a
also-
drop, but it's,
I think the important thing, but by the time that budget was done in FY 23, actually in part of FY 22, we actually did cash flows for each of these projects. We got AE firms on board and we've done cash flows now for the capital costs of these projects. And they're represented here as currently at about, that's 5 to 10% design. So we have a better idea of what those projects look like from a budgetary standpoint.
To your point, Mr. James, we're not seeing anything right now to indicate that the number is going to double what it was. That
when
point,
you see any continuing significant construction price increases? Or have we kind of gone up to that plateau and we're not gonna see major increases like we have the last few years?
We've hit the plateau, we've hit the peak. We're still seeing those prices stay at that peak and not come back down. So when these jobs bid, they're going to be bidding at that higher price. We've assumed that in our cost estimating when we price these jobs out, that we're going to stay at that higher escalation, inflation of, on average.
CIP was based on that.
Yeah, on average, across the board for Riverrenew, for commodities and materials, it was a 30% increase in commodities and materials. When you look at everything, so steel was 75%. So we've taken those into account in our future budgetary estimates, including the ones that Lake has on screen here.
Before we move on, I want to make sure we hear from Ms. Hammer, because she's with us, but we can't see her.
I'm here.
Any questions, Becky?
Not currently, just following along. Thank you.
Okay. Don't be afraid to jump in because he can't see you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Sure.
these are big numbers and a substantial amount of that comes from Fairfax.
Oh.
So I'm wondering, is any of this in your current CIP plan? These numbers are already in your CIP plan?
Yeah, they've been in there, gosh, since I've started here 6 years ago, they've been in there. What happened is, Shram, is when AlexRenew took over Riverrenew, we pushed them way out to get focus on the Riverrenew spending. And now we're coming back to the point where we need to start the planning and design of these to be able to implement them in the next 3 to 5 years. So they've been in most of the budget books that I've seen in the last 6 years. And definitely in our 10-year CIP that we share with Fairfax.
Because those fiscal years seem to be very popular with all the utilities, including ourselves. So we see a huge jump up in our CIP dollars when it comes to those fiscal years. It's very concerning, actually.
Yeah, I think so. Part of this, sorry, Blake, but the solids program, we put that in 2004, 2005 as part of AWTF back then. We're seeing our equipment reach the end of its useful life, especially related to our pasteurization equipment, which is no longer supported by, manufacturer. So we have initial investments in solids. And then the whole front end of the plant requires upgrades, screening and histographs, fine screening, those types of things. That's the 80 million, but that's a little bit longer of a spend. If you look at it, it's 25 through 31. The reason that job's so long is because there's so many different facets of maintenance of flow. So we can't do everything at once. So that's why it's so long. And then tertiary, we're trying to come back and do at the tail end as well. Tertiary filters needed to be, we did an assessment in 2019. We found they needed to be refurbed then, replacing the media. And we're going to be looking to do that in 26 through 29. So those are the major investments that we.
I don't question the need. I just,
No, it's just good. I think
if there's any way you can flatten that out as much as you can, that would be very helpful.
So that, again, the spending of those numbers is really from FY 25 through FY 31. So it's 6 to 7 years.
If I remember the CIP right, the big spend on solids is after 28, right? There's another 70 million after 28. If you're, and again,
Yes,
CIP is
you're correct.
approximate.
There is an initial program for solids to get solids reliable, move away from pasteurization and still meet the class 1 standard. That's step 1. That gets us reliable until we figure out what's going on with the 4-letter acronym PFAS. Once we figure out what we can do with PFAS, we can then look at what we're going to do for investments in the future with solids, whether that be going to a different technology or continuing land application. That's part of our long-term solids plan that we're working on now. We're planning at the same time regulations are changing.
Sure.
I don't recall whether this document has every year, when you do the CIP, kind of at a macro, high level, compare it to the last CIP and say, okay, the deltas by year are, it's 20 million more here, and here are kind of the 2 or 3 big reasons why it's up. So we'll be able to see, how things have changed, the major reasons things have changed. Absolutely. And that would be good to have.
Absolutely, that's a key point. As we go through this process, we'll look at the 10-year FY 24 CIP versus what the new estimates are for the next 25 to 34 and see when there's a delta. As Mr. Carl alluded to, I think during my first or second presentation here, is anytime you make an estimate, you're usually right during the first 5 years of it. The second other half is just a little challenging. That's why we have the opportunity to update our numbers on an annual basis. But you're exactly right. That's part of, like I said, our mechanism when we do the new CIP updates. Look at what the delta was from, like I said, prior year, because now we have better information, especially on projects that are about to start, such as solids. Okay. Pretty much answered all your questions about this slide. But one thing universal about this is pretty much there's a, for lack of a better term, big dollars that we'll be spending over the next few years. Mrs. Breyer will be talking about the source of funding on this project, and I'll turn the presentation over to her.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I've met many of you, but not all of you. So just by way of introduction, Sarah Fry with PFM. We are AlexRenew's financial advisor. We are the top ranked financial advisor nationwide, have been so for 28 consecutive years now. I'm based in Northern Virginia, have worked with you for 15 years, roughly, and focus a lot on utilities here in the Commonwealth. So happy to talk to you this evening. So for all the capital projects that Blake described when we're looking at the CIP, there's a number of sources that you look to fund all of those projects that are outlined here. So TAGA or pay-as-you-go financing or cash, essentially, that's certainly one source of funding. You've been looking at grants and taking great opportunity of those when those are available. The Water Quality Improvement Fund being one, some of the federal grants that came out in the past couple of years. Those certainly all go to fund the capital program. State and federal grants also flow through to some of these other funding programs we use, the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund and the WIFIA Fund, which I'll come back and talk about in a minute. But there's a lot of sources that we use to fund the program in addition to the debt, which we'll talk about here shortly. So just an overview of your existing debt. This is your annual debt service. A couple of points on this slide. If you look in fiscal 24, your debt service is just around $16 million a year, kind of steps up to that $20 million a year range going forward. And the majority of the debt, the two blue, the dark blue and the light blue are the two types of the debt we have outstanding for River Renew. So all the blue is the River Renew debt service and the purple is the other projects that you have.
Just be clear, that's debt service.
Debt service,
It's
correct.
not debt,
Correct. Not debt outstanding, the annual debt service payment.
debt service, yeah.
So what we've been talking to Justin and Lake about is financing options for those capital projects that are coming up and thinking about that planning for debt that is needed to support those capital projects. The last time AlexRenew issued new debt to fund capital improvements was early 2021 for River Renew, and a lot has changed since then with the financial markets. A lot has changed in terms of federal funding, and even some things have changed with AlexRenew. So I want to talk about what type of funding we're looking at and why, give you a little bit of explanation because it is different than last time that you were issuing debt. So to walk through these sources, on the far left, we have the Virginia Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund. That is a state revolving fund. It gets money from the federal government and from the Commonwealth to subsidize the rates. So the rates that are offered through those loans are below market. In most cases, they're 150 basis points below market. It's been a tremendous source of funding for you. Most of your debt is through that fund. Right now, there is more demand for the program than there is supply. And that is a change in the past few years. So just a few weeks ago, they approved their next upcoming fiscal year funding plan. They approved just over 190 million of projects, and they had 600 million apply. So that is a more limited source. There's a lot of projects that got turned away completely and a lot of projects that got cut back from what they requested. So this is a program that I think we're going to continue to pursue. It's a once a year competitive program, an annual application cycle, and we could continue to look at this and try and pursue this funding as the lowest cost of funds. But we do not anticipate it'll be sufficient enough to fund the capital program that we're talking. So the next program on the list, the Water Infrastructure Financing and Innovation Act, or WIFIA, as the federal loan, that was the other basically half of the funding source that used for the River Renew project. They fund up to 49% of project costs. Federal program, the rates are tied to US Treasury rates. When you issued that rate in 2021, it was tremendous timing. We got a 1.88% interest rate. Relatively, it was a great rate at the time, even when rates were low. The market has changed and the way those rates are set has changed. And so right now that's actually a higher cost source of funds than the other options that we'll talk about. So right now, this is as of last week, we're looking at an all-in rate of 465 borrowing through that program. And we'll show you some other options that are now a lower cost. And that's just a function of we're in a very abnormal interest rate environment. Another thing that's changed is there's been new federal requirements applied to projects that get this federal funding through after the bipartisan infrastructure law, the bill, like the Build America, Buy America requirement. So there's more required and more attached to the federal funding that you get in addition to the higher costs. The other program that you've used in the past is another program that the Virginia Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund is administered by VRA. VRA administers a separate program that you've also used. It's a pooled funding program that all localities across the Commonwealth can use. And you share the cost of issuance. Basically, the state goes out and borrows money in the capital markets and pass along the cost to the localities. The interest rate or the ratings on that program is slightly lower than the ratings you have now. And so the cost of debt's a little bit higher. And there's administrative fees attached to it. So this program in general, this is a generalization, but it's really used a lot by smaller projects or localities or entities with lower credit ratings than you have. So the last option, what we've been talking about pursuing and what we're recommending is a new approach for you, but a very common approach in the market. It's a public sale of bonds in the capital market. So selling bonds on your own directly to investors instead of going through one of these programs. So if you look, the interest rate 4.15 lower than these other options we talked about, aside from the Clean Water Fund, which has a limited capacity at the moment. Some of the benefits of that, there's none of the federal requirements that attach, other than any that you choose to impose on your own. You have full control for going through the VRA, all the debt, anything for the next 30 years has to be approved by the VRA board. But again, a new process for you. One other funding option that you have used and you continue to have at your disposal is a revolving line of credit that we view as an interim funding source. It's a short-term facility. We established that. You had it for decades. It went away for a few years. We brought it back in 2020 with the AlexRenew program, and it was used as an interim source of funding until you were able to secure the longer loans for that program. If you recall, last year, this board approved an increase in that. It was 30 million. We took it up to 60 million, in part because of the potential risk of the federal government shutdown. The WIFIA loan being a federal loan, we do have concerns if there's a federal shutdown that you won't be able to draw that funding. We also have experienced delays in getting some of the reimbursements back from the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund. So those are two practical examples of why it's helpful to have that there for emergency purposes. In this current interest rate environment, which is not a normal one, short-term interest rates are higher than long-term rates. So actually to borrow for 1 month is more costly than to borrow for 30 years. So it doesn't make sense to use this as the primary source to fund these new projects. I think it's great to continue to have for emergencies, but not as the primary funding source for these projects.
Question, how would bond anticipation notes differ from a line of credit, and what would that cost be at this point?
So a bond anticipation note, typically 1 or 2 years, and it's a fixed rate note. You could either sell it in the capital markets like we're talking, or to a bank. The interest rates are also set based on the short-term rate. So we still have that inversion. So really any bonds that you're selling now, even for 1 or 2 years, will probably be higher cost than the 4.15 for a 30-year bond.
Choosing an option now, what are our alternatives if 4 months from now, 6 months from now, when you're saying to go to market, that the yield curve inversion has deflated and we have normal, more normal looking interest rate environment?
Yeah, so we have a slide at the end on schedule, but what we're looking for is targeting money around June. So by the end of this fiscal year. And most of these processes, some of them take longer, but a couple of months to plan for. And what we're looking at doing is just based on the cash flows is borrowing for first 2 or 3 years now, and then coming back for a second tranche 2 or 3 years later to fund the 3 major projects that we outlined. So certainly we'd reevaluate at that time. We are always looking at the market. I think frankly, we really would kick off the process for this bond sale in February, March. And if we see the market change, we could certainly pivot. I think we'd have to look at cash flows and decide at that point, if the contract is being let in May, do we want to delay and shift to a different financing approach and draw on the line of credit, for example, to fund that while we shift if market conditions have changed? We certainly have that flexibility.
I think the other thing to note too is we're still going to pursue the Clean Water Fund, Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund as part of any of our financial plans. We keep a conversation open with us and the Clean Water folks to make sure to see how the fund's being funded and what they're recommending, whether it's worth us going after it or not. I think from what Sarah didn't mention is that, this year they kind of shied us away from even pursuing it, given that they're not funding a lot of the programs that for people who are applying. So if our administrative efforts are going to go into something, we're looking at these other options, but it's something we always want to keep an eye on for sure. Clean water.
Just to reiterate, what we're recommending is to pursue a public sale of bonds. And just how we got there, looking at the Clean Water Fund, again, it is the lowest source of capital. We'll continue to pursue it, but not likely to get the amount of funding that we need. So then among the remaining options, the public bonds is the lowest cost. And, you know, as I mentioned, no federal requirements attached to that. You have full control of that debt for as long as it's outstanding, not answering to any other party. The other thing that's new to you, when we got the WIPIA loan, you're required to get a public bond rating, which we did, and you have to maintain as long as the WIPIA loan is outstanding. You have a AAA bond rating, the highest possible credit rating there is, which should translate to the lowest possible cost. And so that's a tremendous benefit that is surveilled. It was last affirmed just a few months ago that now you have a AAA, and so you're going to the market with this very high credit rating, which should help achieve that low interest rate. So this is the steps that we're contemplating, like I mentioned, really starting in February, getting the team on board in the spring, drafting all the bond documents, coming back to this board in May to review. And if you approve those bond documents, we would then turn out and go to the market those to investors, price bonds in early June, and close by the end of the fiscal year.
These bonds, if we're selecting an underwriting team, these are negotiated, so these are not competitively bid bonds, or are they?
That's what we're recommending, negotiated, because you have not been to the market before, and also be your first foray. And so kind of telling your story, I think, is a reason to consider negotiated. It also gives us flexibility to pivot. As you mentioned, there is a lot of volatility in the market. I think we have a little bit more flexibility with a negotiated as compared to a competitive sale with that.
So in future bond sales, that doing it competitively, which my experience has been, is better for you. It's ends up with a better cost of money to negotiate. That's so we're in a unique circumstance right now.
What's the approximate amount of bonds we're proposing to issue?
I think we need to refine that as we go through the rate and the budget cycle that he talked about. I think we're thinking somewhere in the $60 million range. But I think we want to look at that in the context of the debt service impacts and your rates and make sure. I do think just based on the timing and the spend down, it will be in 2 tranches. So we'll do some, spend it down over 2 years, and then do another funding, whatever source that is.
The critical step in this process, because we're new at this, right, is selecting that underwriter. What's the process for selecting the underwriter?
So we would do an RFP process.
It's an RFP process.
Would it be selecting more than one underwriter, a team of underwriters?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we, with this size, we probably pick a lead, a senior managing underwriter, and then a few co-managers to participate with them. And it's an interesting time. And so one of the top ranked underwriters just decided to exit the business a few days ago. It's an interesting time, but we have seen great interest. I mean, 15, 16 underwriters proposing to do this work, and they're outbidding each other with very low fees. So I think there will be good interest, and again, you're very strong credit, new credit. I think it'll be a lot of interest in support and helping you through this.
In your experience, because this is new for us, is this more work for our team than the previous method that we
Yes.
used, or less?
It's more, yes.
Like more.
Yes, we've had a lot of conversations with Lake and Justin about that, and very honest about what that means. I think you already have the rating outstanding in their surveillance, and so that's part of it, maintaining a credit rating. But the other big piece is just the marketing documents and drafting that. I mean, that's a significant document, or Sharam knows,
They're public securities.
that we know.
Yes.
And then it's annual reporting to the market, which you do annual reporting separately to VRA and annual reporting to EPI. And so now it's doing annual reporting to bondholders. So it is more work, which is one of the things that we've talked about. And I think, as we've thought about this over the years, we've had smaller capital funding needs, and we've also been able to use the revolving loan fund.
Right.
But as your needs grow and it's a cost benefit, then it's, the cost benefit savings versus additional staff burden. It's something we spend a lot of time talking about.
On
But
the,
it absolutely is more work.
on the back end, once the project is implemented, there's less administrative burden on AlexRenew if we're going through public bond, because we don't have the tracking and requirements that are necessary associated with some of the current AIS, American Iron and Steel requirements, Davis-Bacon. Our largest contractor, and AlexRenew attracted contractors from all over the world. That process for them was new, and tracking the costs, their labor, and then us tracking on our end, de minimis for steel, things like that. It's going to be less probably on the back end of the job, but more upfront work than what we initially did with WIFIA and Clean Water. But I don't know if it balances out, but I think between us and the contractor, it likely does.
Let me ask a question, both of Mr. Carl and Ms. Fry. To do this, we're going to develop a new strategic skill, right? Does that make sense? Where we're going, thinking 20, 30 years out, the ability to finance through this mechanism, is this a strategic requirement? Listening to you, it sounds like it is. The ability to raise funds in this manner. What do you think? Thanks.
Well, I think so. And one thing is, once you do a offering prospectus and official statement, you basically take it the next time you issue, and you just mark up here and there. You've already done your everything, figured out how to word what you're doing. And once you've done that, then it's just a matter of saying, oh, the project's a little different. We put the year-end financials in that are the latest ones, that are the last ones. So if there is an initial learning and work curve, but you get to take advantage of that over time. And there's, if you're going to fixed rate, there is almost nothing that's cheaper than tax exempt AAA money in the marketplace. On an ongoing as a kind of a rule of thumb for a public entity to borrow money.
So recognizing this is more work, recognizing it is new, it's a skill we need to learn.
It's another tool in the toolbox.
Another tool we should learn how to use. Ms. Hammer, you have been quiet. Are you following along, and do you have any questions?
I am following, and no questions right now. Thanks.
To make sure. But this is anything else?
That's it.
If I may add to your point about looking at this from a strategic standpoint, with the feds hinting at dropping rates over the next few years, we also do have the opportunity at some point in the future to refinance this debt for lower, which benefits our ratepayers too as well. Unlike,
Refinance if the numbers make sense.
Based on
The
the-
minimum amount you want to get out of refinancing.
Yes, sir.
You just put it.
Dave Powell says one thing, and we're all hanging on it. Great, good, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lupe and Ms. Fry. Okay, we're already at item 8. Outcomes report. Carl, any presentation on this?
No, I think just some highlights. The last piece of your packet to the right of you best is the House bill to extend the AlexRenew mandate by 1 year. is a very simple bill. It strikes out 2025, displaces 2026, and then adds an appropriations and historic resources, just some typos from the 2017 law that initially was enacted. So this was introduced by Delegate Bulva. And in the Senate, it will be introduced by Adam Evan and the State Water Commission. Staple to that are the talking points I distributed last Friday regarding the need for the law and the need for the year extension. Just another update on AlexRenew. State Water Commission meeting was on Friday. I distributed an email to the board. We received a unanimous endorsement from the State Water Commission. That gives us the bill validation to move forward through the committees, to General Assembly. In addition to that, it won't count against Senator Evans' bill limit. Well, good feedback, good questions from the State Water Commission. Overall for AlexRenew, we're almost at 70% complete, close to $400 million spent. Hazel is just shy of King Street. You should see an update going out that she hits King Street in a few days. And on the back page of the AlexRenew dashboard, we put a photo up there of the view from Pendleton as if you were standing at the end of the promenade. That's a picture trying to focus the team and the community on the end of this job. The view from that end of Pendleton connecting us to a healthier Potomac is quite stunning. You'll be standing over that 150-foot deep shaft, but it is quite a picture on the back of the board dashboard.
It is.
One other thing to note is the city did introduce a legislative agenda last Tuesday, and again, it was approved by council on Saturday. And in the city's presentation, they went through the CSO legislation. Senator Evan also spoke to it last Tuesday and the need for it. So the last piece is we are also going to be working with our legislative aides on getting some additional funding. We did pass around a flyer that is distributed via email asking for an additional 30 million to help with inflationary impacts. On AlexRenew, we've already spent $18.5 million to support our contractor with inflationary costs. So we're asking to get that reimbursed to help us out. And Ms. Taylor and Mr. Bryant, our legislative support, have been working together. We'll be working with the GA moving forward. We're relying on Ms. Taylor to keep council informed as we move through the process. We keep you all updated, and she's keeping council abreast of the information as well. There's usually 2 emails that go out. Fit for outcomes.
And we have a couple of important dates coming up in January, right? We've got a SAG meeting.
Yep.
And a council board work group.
Quick question for Mr. Carl. The rainfall we had, how did we do as far as processing and since it was pretty intense?
So we had 2 storms. We had last 2 Sundays, we had some pretty intense rain. This Sunday, since the ground was saturated, we saw much more of an impact at the plant. We were at high flow at the plant for about 12 hours. We reached a peak flow rate of about 104 MGD. We were able to manage the storm here at the plant. We filled up the NMF, did well at the plant. At 4 Mile Run Pumping Station, one of our other areas that's affected by infiltration and inflow. We filled up both of the tanks at 4 Mile Run, ran the pump over to its full capacity. The pump over means we pump from 4 Mile Run to Potomac Yard to relieve the Commonwealth a little bit. But we also maximized flow in the Commonwealth. So we saw peak flow there. We didn't have any overflows, and we just checked the data today along Commonwealth. We didn't exceed any, we exceeded the crown of the pipe in the Commonwealth, but it did not affect, from our understanding, any basement backups along the line.
Yeah, question for the city. Did the city see any backups into basements or blown manhole covers?
We had a few basement backups, but mostly related to the roofs, like in ladders, but nothing is like from backup from the city sewer line.
So it was a pretty intense event. We had 2.4 inches of rain over 12 hours on an already saturated ground. We do not like those storms, you know, when we see those storms forecast. So we were all anxious on Sunday afternoon. We were on the phone pretty much all evening. But team did a great job managing the plant, managing the pump over and the pump station.
Any other questions on outcomes? So ends the last meeting of 2023. Well, let's wish everyone very happy holidays and hopefully some rest and relaxation ahead for much as you can. Encourage all the board members especially to think about our visiting session coming up in January. It's funny to look back to our last visioning session where we came up with the 2040 vision. That was before this building was built. It's before the NMF was built, before we could even say AlexRenew. And that vision talked about people establishing a personal connection with water and really the role of AlexRenew in our community. So as we think out to, how far are we going out, Mr. Carl, 2060 now?
Correct.
What's that vision going to be? So as you eat your fruit cake and have your Christmas cookies and celebrate the holidays, think about what's the vision. So, good.
Also, the Post put online today a very extensive story on DC and its risks of flooding in underground rivers, and it's it's similar in a sense the way they did the graphics to the story they did us. It's a very, I'm not sure when it'll show up online, but it's a very long detailed story. There are probably some lessons in there for us.
It's online. It's live.
Yeah, is that online?
Yep.
Anything else? Everybody have a very happy holidays and we'll see you in the new year.
Do a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Who would like to make the last motion?
So moved.
There's second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Ms. Hammer, good to see you virtually.
Yeah, you too. Sorry I couldn't be there.
This is very, it's very unnerving. You're there, but your voice is coming out here.
She's everywhere.
And there's two.
There.
Right.
Right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
All right.
It's all right.